Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Spin here. Today I'm going to review this. It's my Wacom Intuos, might have pronounced that wrong, tablet, the medium-sized one. I've been using it for coming up to 2 years now, and I do have to say I've got good and bad things to say about it, which I'll go into in a minute. But before I do, a couple weeks ago when I was talking about whether or not gear matters, I said I was going to do a review comparing my three-legged things tripod to my Manfrotto tripod. Unfortunately, I can't do that anymore because my Manfrotto tripod broke. So I've gone out and I've gotten this one from Serial. I've probably pronounced that name wrong too. I'm not sure of the exact model. It's literally just for holding my Sony a6400 on it. But I'll give it a go for a couple months, see how it is, and I'll let you know how it goes in a couple months as well. But in saying that, I can still do a review on the three-legged things tripod because that one's still amazing. But getting back to it, this is the Wacom Intuos Medium Bluetooth tablet. It's not the Pro one, it's just the regular one. All right, and I tell you first why I got this one over the Pro one and other sizes as well, and then also how I found using it for nearly 2 years in editing photos. The reason I didn't get the Pro is I didn't really see that much benefit of getting the Pro over a regular one versus the Pro has somewhere for you to stick the pen, so it's always sitting upright on your desk. Whereas with this one, it's got the little sleeve on the top. I'll hold it up there so you can actually see it. Can you see that sleeve? All right, which the way I see it is that it actually reduces clutter on my desk because there's one less thing sitting there. And I deliberately got the medium as well because the small seemed a bit too small for the monitor I was using at the time, which if you remember from nearly a year ago now, actually, I used to have the Microsoft Studio 2, which has a huge monitor. This one is 27 inches, and it is significantly smaller to the Studio, but it still does an amazing job. And one thing I like with these, which I'll get into in more detail, is I wanted it to feel like I was able to move my arm freely or my hand freely when I'm using it without feeling like it was overly compressed and tight, but it wasn't also taking up too much space on the desk. So that's why I wanted the medium, because I saw the small and it just looked a little bit too small for the level of control I wanted. And the large was just huge. There was just no need to get it. And I didn't want to go with the Pro because it was like an extra $50, $60 or something, and I couldn't understand why. So with this one, you do have a few buttons on top. On top of the power button, you've got buttons that you can configure to whatever you like. And the pen also has a few buttons. I'm not sure, you probably can't see it, but just in case, it has buttons that you can configure as well. I never actually used any of the buttons. I found it best to just have the tablet right next to me where the mouse normally goes, and the keyboard next to me to change the Photoshop functions that I needed as well, which I don't even use the keyboard anymore. As I mentioned last week or the week before, I use this gaming keypad, which has been completely configured for Photoshop and Premiere Pro. Before I'll say whether or not it's worth investing in, I'll go over the positives and the negatives because there are good and bad things about it to bear in mind before you do purchase one. The first benefit I want to get into is how it just feels a lot more natural to use the pen on the tablet compared to a mouse when you want to have fine motor skill control over the photos that you're editing. And you don't have to be limited to just landscape photography when you're editing it. You could be doing, I've seen portrait photographers use it, I've seen commercial photographers use it, architecture photographers. It literally comes down to whether or not you find benefit to it. Since I do exposure blending and I don't do composites, but I will merge multiple layers together, I do need that level of control that a pen provides that the mouse doesn't. So in that respect, it does help a lot because it allows me to have more control and it feels much more natural to use a pen than it is a mouse when you're trying to, draw on the screen. And with that control, I am able to get a much better image, in my opinion anyway, than if I use the mouse because it's a lot easier to control where the mouse goes using the pen as well, and there's less editing time involved when you want to get that fine detail perfected, so to speak. Which ties in nicely to the second benefit of this is that with the software you download for the tablet, you can configure it so that however much of this actual tablet space will match either one monitor, or in this case, I've got two monitors. And to make sure I'm not feeling like I'm, just doing little squiggles, I've mapped it so this whole tablet actually matches the monitor itself at the same aspect ratio, which is 16:9, because that way I don't feel like a little movement with the finger or with the pen will make a huge movement on the screen. I know you can zoom in and out and all of that, but if I can speed it up by just making sure that with whatever I'm doing feels more natural with the pen, then it's going to speed up my editing workflow, which means I spend less time editing than I need to, which is always a benefit. So because you can map it out, I've seen some photographers where they'll have the large pro medium one, but they'll just map up this small section here because that's all they need. And it's completely up to you how you map it out. I've mapped it out so that it's the full screen, full tablet matches the full screen. It does mean more arm movement, but I find it a lot more natural than just doing that with your fingers like you're writing sort of thing. I feel like I have less control than if I move my arm. So that's the best part about the tablet, is that it's a lot easier, it's a lot more natural to use it compared to a mouse. And granted, this is an amazing mouse, don't get me wrong, but when you want that fine control, the pen is a lot more natural because, you know, the always writing. So those are the main benefits of the tablet. The biggest downside to it that I found so far, I should say, is if you want to get the Pro at any rate, is the price. This one was about 280, 290 roughly that I got it for from Officeworks a couple years ago. The Pro in medium was 400 actually. And I simply couldn't see the reasoning why. This has done a perfect job. I mean, I've got nothing to fault about it. Because in photography, when you want to invest your money in something, whether it's lenses, camera bodies, editing tools, your laptop that you're editing on, you want to make sure that what you're actually purchasing is going to last as long as possible and that it does become a good investment. I mean, one prime example of an investment I made in editing equipment that didn't pan out was the loop deck. I thought it would be great for editing, which it's not a bad tool. It's just not suitable for me as someone who edits maybe 3 or 4 pages when you've taken 100. Whereas it's better for someone who, like a wedding photographer, who's got to edit 1,000. So I've actually sold the loop deck because of the mere fact I was never using it. But this always sits on my desk. It's always here with me. I do only use it when I take my photos into Photoshop to get that control I want when I'm blending layers together, you know, like a dark sky and a brighter foreground or whatever the case may be. And that's where it comes in handy. But as I mentioned, though, the price can be a turnoff at first, and you want to try and get the best you can with the mouse. But once you get it and you spend about a week playing with it, it does pay itself off quite quickly in terms of time saved. The other negative to it, and I don't know if it's this model specifically, but it's sometimes the Bluetooth is a bit patchy. And I know it's not the laptop because I was having the same issues with this when I was on the studio, but sometimes with the Bluetooth, it is a little bit patchy and it can be a bit finicky at times. Whereas if I just plug it in using the micro USB port to the laptop instead, then it's perfect, right? So if you don't mind that cable being there, keep it plugged in instead. If the cable is an issue, just be aware that the Bluetooth can be a little bit iffy sometimes. That's the only thing to bear in mind. So I'm just looking down here because I've got my iPad with me just to make sure I've got notes to make sure I stay on topic. And the last thing to bear in mind is the nips or whatever they're called on the pens. I don't know the proper term. Or I might be pronouncing it wrong, I've got no idea. But the nips do wear out quite quickly. But that's possibly my fault as well because if I am masking out a huge area, probably I'm better off using the mouse versus the pen for that. Just because it doesn't scratch the tablet, but it does wear off. And then I'm actually on the second nib already, which I guess one nib every 2 years isn't too bad, but you have to factor in half of last year was a write-off because of COVID and lockdown. In saying that, would I recommend this? If you find you're using the mouse a lot in Photoshop, then yes, absolutely. I would recommend it because I just find a lot more control of that. When I say using the mouse a lot, I mean when you're trying to blend multiple layers and you're trying to get just those few pixels blended in properly so there's not overlap. That's where this comes in handy because I have found it a lot better than using a mouse. If the initial upfront cost isn't an issue to you, then yes, it is a worthwhile investment. I'm still using this 2 years later. I use it on nearly every photo that I edit in Photoshop, and I can't say anything bad about it. I really can't. I'd rather not have the cable plugged in all the time, but you know what? One cable to make life a lot easier is a small price to pay. And then on the days I'm not using it, I just unplug the cable and then plug it back in when I need it anyway. So it's not always sitting there taking space on the desk. I hope this review was helpful. If you have been considering this, I hope it helps you decide whether or not you should get it. As I said, multiple times already that I do recommend it if you find yourself using the mouse a lot and you want that little bit of more control than what the mouse can offer, or at least easier control, I should say. And if you do have any other questions about this, let me know in the comments or send me a direct message on any of my social media channels to get back to you as soon as I can. If you have liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. That'd be greatly appreciated. And if you want to stay up to date as well, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Make sure you ding that little notification bell. I'm going to come up with different terms for hitting that notification bell until I find what I like. And then at least that way YouTube will tell you when a new video comes out. But I'll leave it there for today. Keep it nice and short and not too much faff. And I'll see you in the next video. Have a good night.